When it comes to automotive manufacturing, most of the brands adhere to established standards and trends and are afraid to stray beyond the industry's boundaries. However, there are those who couldn't care less about these standards, and Subaru is, without a question, one of those brands. Since its very inception in 1953, Subaru has positioned itself as a manufacturer that stands out and isn't afraid to experiment. Their vehicles have always been unconventional and different from the rest. And the topic of today's video is no exception. Back in 1989, Japanese automakers had already become significant players in the global market, and they were already actively targeting the sports car market, and almost every major player had their own sports car by now. For example, Nissan had the 300ZX as well as the R32 Skyline, Toyota had the Supra A70 and the Celica, and Mazda had the RX-7 FC. Seeing all of this, Subaru decided to join the competition as well, and Subaru being Subaru, they decided to compete in their own way, and decided to create a GT, or a Grand Tourer. In simpler terms, a Grand Tourer is a car that combines both high performance and high comfort in one vehicle. Originally, GTs were designed for comfortable long-distance trips, and the term itself emerged in the early 1950s with the introduction of cars like the Lancia Aurelia B20 GT in 1951, the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL in 1954, and the Ferrari 250 GT in 1956. The upcoming Gran Turismo was meant to replace the Subaru Alcyone XT, a vehicle that, in all honesty, deserves its own video. So just like its predecessor, it carried on with the Alcyone name, but only in Japan. The name Alcyone refers to the brightest star in the Pleiades constellation, which is stylized in Subaru's logo, and the abbreviation SVX stood for Subaru Vehicle X. The design of the Grand Tourer was overseen by none other than the legendary automotive designer Giorgetto Giugiaro of Ital Design. Giugiaro is renowned for his work on iconic vehicles such as DMC-12 DeLorean, first generations of Volkswagen Golf, Jetta and Sirocco, as well as the Lotus Esprit S1, De Tomaso Mangusta, and BMW M1. He conceptualized the car with a smooth, streamlined body, drawing some ideas from his previous projects, such as the Ford Maya and Oldsmobile Incas. The car had little to no resemblance to its sharp and angular predecessor, which was the Subaru XT, and the most interesting design element of the SVX was its unique aircraft-inspired glass-to-glass canopy, as well as the distinctive side windows, which were considered exotic, as such windows could only be found in vehicles like the Lamborghini Countach or the aforementioned DeLorean. The SVX was unveiled at the Tokyo Motor Show in 1989 as a concept, even though the mass-produced SVX looked nearly identical to the concept. Yet at the same motor show in Tokyo, Mitsubishi presented the new 3000 GT, a new contender in the Grand Tourer competition. Interestingly, in 1990, Mazda were to introduce the new Yunos Cosmo, which technically was also under the Gran Turismo classification, and thus, Subaru, despite its attempt to be unique, still faced competition. Right after the presentation of the SVX, from 1991 to 1992, Subaru were showcasing a prototype of a shooting brake based on the SVX, which was called Amadeus. Fortunately or not, it did not go into production. In July 1991, the SVX made its debut in the US, and in the September of the same year, it was also released in Japan. In comparison to the previous generation Alcyone, which either had a 1.7-liter turbocharged flat 4 or a naturally aspirated 2.7 flat 6, the SVX was only offered with a naturally aspirated 3.3-liter flat 6, known as the EG33. It produced 230 horsepower and 228 foot-pounds of torque. The EG33 featured dual overhead camshafts and 4 valves per cylinder. EG33 was capable of propelling the SVX from 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds, with a curb weight of the car of about 3.5 thousand pounds. The engine was developed specifically for this model and was only available paired with a 4-speed automatic transmission, known as the 4EAT, which definitely limited the engine's potential. At that time, Subaru did not possess a manual transmission which was capable of handling that much power. Nevertheless, in the early years of production, the SVX had a top speed of 154 miles per hour, which was later electronically limited to 143 miles per hour. The car was offered with various all-wheel drive systems depending on the region, For example, in Japan, England, Northern Europe, Australia, and Latin America, the SVXs were equipped with VTD, or variable torque distribution, which adjusted the torque distribution between the front and rear wheels at a ratio of 64 to 36, adjusting it to 50-50 if the system was detecting the car's slippage. As for the US, Canada, Germany, France, and Switzerland, it featured a different system, named ACT4 or ACT4, also known as active torque split. The ACT4 was constantly calculating and adjusting its torque distribution, but usually it remained at a ratio of 90 to 10. However, in order to reduce costs and attract new customers, there were also front-wheel drive versions of the Subaru SVX offered from 1994 to 1995, which were priced $5,000 lower, but the front-wheel drive SVXs were not very popular. The Subaru SVX quickly gained its infamous notoriety due to its problematic transmission, as the early models had defective torque converter clutches, which were prone to literally disintegrating during their operation. Additionally, early SVX models suffered from oil consumption issues with the engines. The Subaru SVX was initially offered with a price tag of $24,000 in its base trim, and if fully optioned, the price rose to $28,000 or $63,203 in today's money. For about the same price, buyers could get their hands on a new Acura Legend or maybe even a BMW 3 Series. By 1996, the price of the fully optioned SVX had skyrocketed to $36,700. That's $71,349 today. At that time, Subaru was still producing cars like the Brat, Justy, Loyale, and Legacy, and wasn't quite known for its luxuries, so consequently, the buyers were very apprehensive about the SVX. And yet, despite the questionably high price tag and the fact that the car itself launched during an economic downturn, there were plenty of sales in the US, with 5,280 cars sold in the first year and 3,859 in the second one, although initially, Subaru had intended to sell about 10,000 SVXs per year. And it didn't help Subaru that their competitor's Grand Tourer, the Mitsubishi 3000 GT, being priced higher than the SVX, was still selling like hotcakes, since from 1991 till 1993, taking into account that the 3000 GT came out a year earlier than the SVX, Mitsubishi managed to sell over 35,000 3K GTs. Moreover, it was 70 horsepower stronger than the SVX, and it boasted more advanced technologies. In total, 24,379 Subaru SVXs were made. 14,257 of them were sold in the US, almost 2,500 in Europe, and approximately 7,000 right-hand drive configurations were sold in places like Japan and Australia. With each SVX sold, Subaru lost about $3,000, and by 1997, as the sales figures in the US, which was the main market for the Subaru SVX, dropped to just 640 units, Subaru's executives decided to cease production of the car. The total loss from the model amounted to around $75 million. Somewhere in the mid-90s, a magazine named Collectible Automobile stated that the Alcyone would become a popular collector's car. Nearly 30 years later, well-maintained examples of this model are priced from $7,000 to $10,000, and in the future, their prices will definitely go upwards. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the newest videos. See you next week.